We're now going to look at how we can use BrightLocal to check our performance versus our competition. And the first report I'm going to demonstrate here is the local search grid. If you're unfamiliar, this report looks at local rankings for keywords or search terms at a very granular level. So quite literally, as we can see here, grid points on the map. But we can also use this report to benchmark our business versus our top competitors. As we can see, if we scroll just a little bit further down to our overall top ranking competitors table. But before we look at the report itself, I want to demonstrate a few settings as there's a few important things to note. And if you're unsure, we can find the report settings page if we scroll back up to the top under the actions drop down on the top right here, and then select edit report settings. When we're looking at the local search grid report settings, we really want to pay attention to the map criteria section. So here, we really want to think about our proximity and our location. So a few questions we might want to ask ourselves. Where is our customer base? If we're a service area business, how far are we going to be willing to travel? What's our competitor and local landscape looking like? And then, with these in mind, we want to adjust the grid size and spacing so that we're not wasting any grid points. We can deselect or even drop down new grid points to shape that around our location. Or we can play around with the grid point spacing to expand or even contract that grid to an area that's going to be insightful for us. Essentially, these blue grid points that we see here are where we're going to be emulating that ranking data from to return your ranking results. Next, we'll want to pay attention to the keywords that we're tracking here. So really think about what are the most important keywords and what are people realistically searching for. Finally, we have the general settings, which is where we can select how often we want that report to run. So we have the options of ad hoc, so it will only run when we come in and tell it to do so, or we can have that run weekly or even monthly. We can also opt in to email alerts every time that report generates, so that way we're notified to come in and look at the report in its most up-to-date form. Now, looking back at the report itself, we can see it's very visual. We use the red, amber and green system to visually indicate our performance at each of these grid points. We can hover over an individual grid point to see the top 3 ranking businesses here, or we can select that point to see the top 20 ranking businesses, as well as some information into how far away they are from that grid point, as well as some information into their review count and their average star rating. If we want to change the keyword that we're looking at for this grid, we just need to scroll up and select keyword. Here, we get an idea of how that keyword is currently performing across an average of that grid, as well as an indication of how many average points that keyword has increased or decreased since the most previous report. As we build up those reports over time, we'll start to populate this timeline where we can start to compare our historical data versus our most recent reports. Just as we saw before, we can scroll all the way down to see our top ranking competitors table. So across an average of that grid, who are the best performing competitors, which is why it's really important to refine and shape and size that grid to be the most insightful for you. We start to compare some important Google Business Profile metrics, such as the authority, again looking at reviews, but also getting some insights into the primary and additional categories used by our competitors. So we might start to identify in which areas we may need to start catching up and eventually outranking our competitors to stand the best chance of ranking highly across that grid. I'm briefly going to look at another tool now, which is the local search audit, just found on the left side toolbar here. This report gives us a summary of the key local SEO factors and how we're currently performing across those areas. Each of these areas are covered by our wider tools, so although we get snippets of information in this report, we'd want to look at the individual tools to get the deeper insights. The main benefit of this report, however, is that we're able to get some additional insights into backlinks, our web authority, and some information about our on-site SEO. Again, we use that traffic light system to visually indicate that performance and help you easily identify what you might want to prioritize or what your best next steps may be. So that covers how we can start to use BrightLocal to perform a level of competitor analysis. Next, we'll be looking at how we can actually improve our rankings. So please join me for that lesson. I look forward to seeing you there.